What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka Toe Tag and Tambo, back for another edition of the Monday Resultsdb show. Of course, looking back at the PGA event from the week that's just prior. We're looking at the Travelers Championship, and I've got my main guy here, Justin Carlucci, the Luch, and he'll also be on with me this Wednesday on the Wednesday Lineup HQ show. So I'm excited about that when we get into the Rocket Mortgage Classic. But of course, today we're looking back. Luch, how you doing, my friend?
Good to be back here. Wild tournament, a lot of swings, a lot of chalky swings over the weekend too. Crazy stuff. So much ground to cover, really. We talked about Bubba's implosion a little bit before we get on here, but then you have a very lengthy playoff. I mean, grueling, just absolutely crazy stuff, Tambo. So what's your take on that long playoff situation?
Yeah, so I know what the conversation was around the world, and everyone wanted the 15 to get brought in. I myself included, because 15 is the drivable par 4. There's so many ways to go about it. That should end it pretty quickly. The good news is, and I was going to talk about this tonight with Kenny Kim when we do the Fantasy Golf Degenerates podcast, is that the Travelers has been talked about all week is a 4 players type tournament. The caddies get a place to stay and get taken care of. Everybody loves it there because that they give a lot back to the community. I don't need to big up all that stuff. That's just the facts. But I do believe they'll take this feedback seriously and change it for next year. At the same time, it's just 2 guys playing some really good golf, man. It's hard to, say that Kramer Hickok, this guy made like 5 or 6 6-footers when he had to make them or he lost. And then he lipped out a couple when he could have won. So, tough beat for him. I always compare PGA golf to PGA DFS in the sense that you got to grind, man. It's really tough. And you can get very close and come up just short. It just keeps you hungry for the next time out. But Kramer Hickok definitely became a fan favorite after the way he played it down the stretch. All the Jordan Spieth comparisons, and that used to be his roommate and good friends and went to college with him. I get all that, but man, he showed a lot of heart down the stretch. So that was awesome to see. The implosion of Bubba, you mentioned it. As soon as Bubba went in the water, Bubba Wetson, as soon as he got wet there, it was all over. Bogeys and double bogeys down the stretch. We will look at some of the stuff there. Our main guy, Cal Spears, he was really in a big sweat in the 3,100 to take down the 100K, and the Bubba implosion, unfortunately, sorry, Cal, took him out of it, but we will look at that. Anything else you want to talk about with that tournament before we hop into some of the results and exposures and things people did? Because the only other thing I can think of, you mentioned a little, but Casey, Answer, all the guys that looked sort of out of it just bounced back into the mix near the end. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we might as well jump into that because obviously those were all chalky plays, and that's a big part of what we're going to discuss. But yeah, after Thursday, if you're fading Abraham Answer, you're like, hell yeah, Tambo, what a great fade. Then the weekend turns around, and then he has an ace, and things start to snowball, and he catches fire, and we really start to see that iron game clicking. And the Abraham Answer we thought we'd have for 4 rounds, we got for like 3. So that really came around. Paul Casey, man, I mean, he was looking good early in the early Thursday. Then he bogeyed 4 holes in a row on the back, and the Casey owners, as usual, had a sweat. Casey is just, it's so hard to play when he's chalk because he never gets it done, but he's always a threat to top 5, right? Super consistent, always in that affordable price range. So, Casey had a really good comeback, and, there's a ton of surprises here. Harris English, obviously, returned to form, played some good golf recently, not a huge sample size, but, there were some glimmers of hope as if he could kind of keep it going here. So he looked good. And I think, just one more takeaway looking at this. Well, 2 more quick takeaways is, Mr. Pete Dye, Jason Day. How about that? What a showing, great performance. And just looking at some strokes gained and stuff on the leaderboard here. And, Bryce Garnett was just kind of an anomaly. He lost strokes, tee to green, approach around the green. But everywhere. I don't know what the numbers are, but he might have led the tournament in putting. He gained 13 strokes putting. So wow. I mean, that flat stick really saved Bryce there too. So crazy stuff here. Crazy stuff, Tambo.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome, to see the Xander at Memorial when he was like +8 and then came back and finished top 15 or whatever. That's kind of what Answer did to an even better tune. And obviously the hole-in-one helped if you were having the scores and whatnot. It does all the scoring to get back into it is huge. And we'll see that and why he pops up on some, but we're going to hop right in. You just go to rotogrinders.com, you go to PGA, you go down to Resultsdb. It's the results database where we're looking at it. You're changing the date to the previous Thursday when the tournament started, which is June 24th in this case, and clicking contests. And you'll just simply see all the contests here, the $20, the $5.55, and the $31.80. And we're going to do it a little bit different this week. I have it already propped up here, but I will pull up a little bit more pain for our guy, Grinders Cal, but I don't want to bring it up for that reason. It is what it is. It happens. We all know it's a part of the game. The Bubba implosion really hurt him. And down the stretch, it was a lot of Harris English lineups. Obviously, with him getting into the mix, there was one there. I know Brick 75 had one, and then Peter Gibbons. All these guys are well known and members and things like that. But you've seen where, you know, they only won by a little bit and Cal did not have English. So if English loses those 10 points, he jumps 2 spots here over the one Brick lineup that had it and the Peter Gibbons lineup and ends up making like an extra, I believe, 20K or so or something around that range. But I do want to show it off for this reason. I really like the lineup, and I'm sure you guys will see where it kind of came from here in a second. So Casey, Answer, Bubba Watson, Sam Burns, Guido, fist bumping Guido back in the mix, had himself another great week, man. He's making the most of it. And he said, I talked about this last week, he said he's going to go Sung J M style and sort of just play whatever he can and as many events as possible. And then Ches Reavy to round it out. And the reason I want to show this off is because we'll get to it real quick here, Luch, so we can get to the meat and potatoes of the show. But Noto's model, just you can find it on Rotogrinders. If you're a premium member, you'd have access to all of this. And I watch it each week all the time. And he told me, and I mentioned this on the Wednesday show with cards, that he says even in his MME stuff, he said he was going all in Paul Casey. Paul Casey had ranked out with the Noto rating of almost 100 and the #1 overall rank. You go back to the lineup here, Paul Casey's in it. You go down to Answer. He's right here, and you scroll across. Look at all the places, how good he ranked out across the board. 5th overall in Noto's ratings, and his price was only 9,100. So it was down from some of those guys at the top. Whereas, yes, Bryson beat him and was 3rd, but Bryson cost $2,000 more. So what can you do with the lineup, right? It's a little bit different what you can do. He's got those two. Get out of Noto's model for a second. Let's flip over to Cards. Cards does the GPP breakdown for the Travelers Championship. Every week he does it, but this is what we're going to look at here. You go down. He had Answer. He has Watson. We go down. There's Watson. He has Guido. There's Guido. And then I know we had tagged up Burns and Reavy, and you can go back and check that stuff out. I didn't bring it all up, but just to show you, just mixing together some of the premium plays from Noto Cards, the tags that we're putting in, the conviction tags, the value plays, and all of that. Reavy had been playing good golf coming in. Sam Burns seemed underpriced for how good of a season he had been having. The lineup just makes perfect sense, and it almost got there. So again, shout out to Cal. I thought it was awesome to see. I know it wasn't the result that he wanted in the end, but still made money and still has a chance to fight back at it again this week. Any thoughts there on that, Luch, before we move on to the big $20?
That's a really, really cool contest. Obviously, the less entries there are, the higher stakes you play, the sharper the fantasy players are. The quote unquote rate plays will garner even more ownership. So you're seeing guys like Abraham Answer, pushing 40%. Pretty funny and ironic that Brick had 497. That's not a duped lineup. There were actually 2 totally 6 of 6 golfers there on his 2 teams there. It's just the way it worked out. And one lineup did not have Harris English. And, when you play against less entries, you don't always need the winner when a guy like Harris English wins, because he's not going to be in everyone's lineup when he's, an 8K guy, 7K guy. So, we saw last week in the Millie, the winner didn't have John Rahm. So there are some, rarities where you don't need the winner to have a big payday. And as you work down denominations in terms of entry fees, but there's more bigger fields. So you have 135 entries here in this 3K tournament. What was the winning score? 506. If you look at just for argument's sake, you look at the 555 signature hole, 548 took it down. So you need another 48, 40 plus points there. There's more entries, more multi-entering going on. And then, of course, you want to talk about the big tournament where Hacksaw 11 took it down. I'm sure you're going to get in there too. 584 took that down. So, we talk about contest selection, and maybe people don't talk about it enough for newer players, but you have to see what your style is. If you want to play higher stakes and play more chalk and play more comfortable type of lineups, then you might be better off playing higher stakes and you're comfortable doing so. But you really have to be perfect, to take something down with 50,000 or 100,000 entries. And when you talk about Hacksaw 11's lineup, we can dive into that. And that lineup brought a tear to my eye. There was some sick leverage, low total ownership there, Tambo. That was a tournament winning lineup. Beautiful stuff there.
Yeah, we're going to flip to that next. I love the segue. Last call, like I said, the crazy part with Brick 75 just dominates all sports. You guys know him from around. You can find him on Twitter. Great stuff. Does some stuff on YouTube as well. Some good shows every week with Pete Overzet and some funny stuff there too. But really digging in, looking, it's crazy. This might be harder to do. Comes second and third with two completely unique lineups. It's 6v6 total with leaving $500 on the table in both, and both of them getting to the top three. So 2 podium finishes, no gold. Unfortunately, still a very nice week. For just this tournament alone, he's in for just over 9,000. It was a 3180, I believe, to buy in, and he picks up 47.5 times 2. So you look at that, that's a pretty nice setup there. As you mentioned, obviously, contest selection, this won't be for everyone. I just wanted to show that you can use that. And the reason I brought it up, I'm trying to tie it in together here, is so Cal's lineup put up 492.5. You say, yeah, but I can't buy into no $3,000 tournament. That's fine. I don't even buy into them. A lot of people don't. It's a lot of money to put on the line. I'll save it up for maybe majors or somewhere where I have a certain feel, or I'll try and get in via the satellite tickets and the queues that we always talk about. But it wouldn't have crushed here or anything. But if you look here, I mean, it still would have taken home $1,000 on 200 in the $200 single entry. And clearly it had upside for more. So yes, some of these other ones would have too and gone up with it, but just showing off that you don't necessarily need to go up to that level. It's just, how can you think about your lineup that you can still have it in a unique spot, put it in something that suits your bankroll. And then again, you don't need the 584.5 like Hacksaw to take it down. So let's flip over to Hacksaw. Let's look at this one. I will tie it in quick. We're not going to review both, but what I really did like, and you and I talked about this last week, Luch, was if they could get some of these tournaments on the same page. And this week they actually did with the $8 8-iron. You could put in 150 entries. You could play in the same exact field size of 58, 824 as the big $20, and you just played for $100,000 instead of 250K. So again, whatever your budget is, maybe you could only put 10, maybe you could put 32, as member Cross 77 did. Shout out to LaRussa 23 for taking it down with a single bullet. But the point was, they did bring out the tournament with the same field size. So you could, again, if your bankroll doesn't get you into the $20, you could drop it down to the $8. So I really did like that. We're not going to review both. I just wanted to show quickly, 588 to win this $8, 584. It's pretty similar, right? It's not going to change too much, but we are going to look at the $20 because most play this as almost like a secondary type milli maker. You don't always get the tournaments that you can win 250K off of $20. But talk about Hacksaw 11. You mentioned, brought a little bit of a tear to your eye. You love the leverage. Brooks Koepka, Brian Harman, Harris English, the eventual winner after that aforementioned 8-hole playoff. Mark Leishman, Stewie Sink, big Stewie Sink, came back from the dead a little bit too. He had a rough day one day there, but he certainly did a lot better than Emiliano Grillo, Ricky Fowler, all the other guys at 7,300 that broke hearts. And then you talked about the Garnett putting, 14 strokes, whatever it was with the putter, losing strokes in every other category across the board. What did you think of the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I love the Koepka call. I didn't have enough of him personally. I mean, I had some Koepka. Didn't have the cojones to go more, but Koepka took this tournament seriously. People often question him either before or after a major, what he's going to be like mentally. Just super consistent. 69 on Thursday, and then 67, 69, closing with a 65. I mean, just super consistency, gained strokes tee to green, approach game was fine, didn't crush it with the flat stick, but, probably would have took the thing down if he putted well. I mean, really, he was right there, 3 strokes off the lead. So I think Koepka was a great call and a great large field tournament play. And, there was some chalky plays in this lineup. Brian Harman pops every week, and he's just playing maybe some of the best golf of his life, consistent top 10 upside, top 15 upside. Obviously it had Harris English. Mark Leishman is the real boomer bust type of guy. I mean, every tournament, this guy is coming in, maybe playing some of the worst golf of his life over the last, X amount of weeks. You can throw that out the window every week for Leishman because he'll pop a top 5, like just out of the blue like that. Leishman is one of those boomer bust guys, kind of reminds me of Louis in a non-major, right? Just kind of a little bit afraid to get to play him in a non-major, but it worked out. And, Stu Sink, driving the ball further this year, sub 10%, but man, getting Garrett at sub 1%. We talked about the putter bailing him out, but that's a 64% total ownership in that lineup. Just for comparison's sake, you saw all the the lineups Tambo just showed you on the screen, you're looking at over 100% total ownership in some of those lineups. But that's just a field size thing, and you play for more money. People play a little bit safer. I don't know what Garrett's ownership was in the 3K, but I wouldn't be shocked if nobody had him, because that's just the way it is. I mean, how much do you enjoy potentially lighting money on fire? When you max something out and you play for $10, $20, you're willing to have exposure to a lot of these pump plays. And, 64% total ownership is pretty much right in the wheelhouse of where you need to be typically, from research to take some of these large field type stuff down. We saw last week, I think the ownership was over 100% that took down the Millie, which in my opinion was kind of an anomaly. When I built my lineups during the Millie week, I had them every lineup set to 70% or less. Didn't work out for me because all of the chalk smashed, but there were some guys that were really low owned on the top of this leaderboard. You talked about Kramer, Hammer and Hank was up there too. We had some really fun names towards the top. And when you have a lot of these cheap guys, these pump plays, top 10, you're going to need some low ownership in terms of your lineup to take something down.
Yeah. And you mentioned last week, like I think at a major, you can always wager for a little more, if you will, because for the ownership wise, because some of the plays just are the better plays, and because the softer pricing, and it's going to gravitate people towards it with all the content and the data sites and things that are out there right now, we can see why that becomes more prevalent and why you could see that. We are going to dig into Hacksaw because they did put in 150 lineups. I think that's solid. You want to see where they went with it. How much Garnett did they truly have? I mean, a couple things about the lineup that stand out to me. One is they only went with it's kind of like the textbook that, in the past, TJ and I have always talked about. I think you've been involved in enough conversations with me now, Luch, to know it's not always the case, but if you got a couple guys over 20, couple guys that are pushing the 10, and then two really low owned leverage plays, and that's kind of where they're at. Stewie Sink, you can call it 10. Brooks, you can call it almost 10. You got the two chalk plays. The other thing is it just continues to be a pattern, but the plays that are 8,000 or more that have ownership attached, Casey, Answer, Harmon, English, they all fared pretty well, even if it did take some slow starts and some bounce backs for them to get there, or vice versa. Whereas a Grillo at 7,300, as I mentioned last week, there's just so many guys in that $7,300 price range. And here's the other thing, Stewie Sink was one of the guys I'd mentioned last week, where you've got a two-time winner. I don't care what, if that's an anomaly in your head, he's won 2 times on tour this season. This wasn't the craziest field strength that it's not like he couldn't have at least made the cut and contended again. So that's where you start to see, and he was half the ownership of a guy like Grillo. But I like how when you go up to a guy like Brooks under 10%, you can take on Harmon and English as guys you think are great plays at their ownership and price. And you're fine with their ownership, sorry, because they're great plays at their price, in your opinion. And then get guys like Leishman and Garnett to round it out if you want. By the way, Leishman won. He won the Zurich Classic with Cam Smith just weeks ago. It's not like he didn't have a part in that. Maybe Cam Smith did more of the heavy lifting. Maybe he didn't. My point is more, you've got guys. Harmon and Koepka always can contend. English was going for a 2-time winner on tour, which he achieved, the 5th guy this season, along with another guy who already has it in Sink, a guy who won the Zurich, and then you're taking your risk on Garnett. It's awesome when you have a 0.6% owned guy that comes through with 14 strokes gained putting to put up almost 100 points, but that's part of the game. That's why you take the risk on. So I want to look first at a couple things. I want to look at Hacksaw just to see some of their other finishes right here locally, because we'll be able to see their name. Ownership wise, still around 60%, not using that. We're not going to do all the math. I'm just showing still 49.5, really low ownership. This one's one of their more chalkier lineups, but again, left 500 on the table, so it doesn't matter. I'm just going to now do my own thing quickly and see 50,000. So they were allowing for 50,000, but here's as low as 48.1. 50,000 was okay, but most of the 50,000s have way under that 60, like you talked about. So just everything we look at on a Wednesday, and we'll be doing it again this week, Luch. You and I already mentioned at the top of the show, we've got our show coming in this week on Lineup HQ. If they were leaving a bunch of money, they didn't so much care. Like here's 14, 10, 20, 25, 14. Who cares when there's $1,300 on the table? You're still going to be unique. But when they were going closer to 50,000, now it's a 2, 1, 2.35. So it does look like there was some rules set, maybe some sets built where you're doing some of your lineups like that and allowing for that. And then let's look at their total pool here. Get your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
So here's Hacksaw's pool, Luch. Any comments on the previous? To me, it looks pretty straightforward. It's all the stuff we look at on the Wednesday show here, the premium Lineup HQ show, where they're, when they're spending all the money, they're keeping the ownership low. When they're keeping the money low and they're only spending 48.1 or 48.7, they don't care about the ownership because they're all already going to be unique anyway in most cases. Here's their pool though. And again, allowing for some mistakes still. When you only go 45% and you still get quite a bit of leverage across the board as you go down, you can have some guys that don't come through for you. Overall, their pool looks pretty solid, though. What are your thoughts on everything here?
Yeah, big landmine for me in my lineups too was Ricky Fowler. Just had one terrible stretch of holes, and that was Hacksaw's second highest owned golfer according to our database. So he was able to take down big payday with having a huge landmine. He might have not felt so good when he saw Ricky Fowler implode, but as the weekend went on, you scroll all the way down to Bryce Garnett, and he only had like 4% of them. So the cards fell where they were. He made sure his lineups were all unique, like you said, keeping ownerships in check, making sure it had enough leverage. And obviously Koepka was the big win for him. Obviously anytime Koepka comes in under 10%, but a lot of those same concerns we have, where's he at mentally? Is he fully healthy? And Hacksaw made a very nice, calculated, educated risk and decision here. Huge leverage. Koepka really made this thing. He was underweight on Harris English. Harris English was over 20% owned. So he had just enough of the kind of correlating, not top dog pieces here. And when you can really pick out, the one stud and maybe make one or two fades all the way up top, that can really set yourself up, like you said, to have some mistakes and things like that. So really well done from top to bottom for Hacksaw.
Yeah, I like it. A couple things that stood out to me. So I just found Bryce Garnett here at 4%. It may not seem like much to you, but when you're on 150 lineups, these 0.6% owned, you hope that it's still only those few number of lineups because it's only 4% of your total. But at the same time, you're just hoping it falls into the right one. And in this case, it did. Like you said, maybe one thing that I overlooked last week, and it's obviously results oriented that we've got to this point, but maybe Brooks will take regular season events which involve Bryson more seriously, because now he's up 2-0. Remember, Bryson had him going into Sunday at the US Open and then had that crazy 10 or whatever it was on that hole, or 8, I believe it was. So it was a snowman, but it was a par 4, I believe. And he fell apart completely there, which allowed Bryson to get the 1-up on that event. And now Brooks was in here. And when he makes the weekend, he's always going to have upside because he'd be sticking around anyway. Why not try and get this W? And he's obviously not trying to lose or come in second. He's been quoted as saying that many times. It's just he's been honest about it. He even said it this past weekend in quotes that, listen, it's hard to have the same discipline in a regular season event than in a major, where he knows if he has full discipline in a major, he can get there no matter what. In these events where guys are scoring like crazy and Hank Lebioda and Kramer Hickok are in the mix and going low, it's not because he's not motivated or disciplined. It's more so because they have outs to get there by throwing up these 65s and 64s on these easier courses. So I do like what he said there. I think a lot of it makes sense. Hacksaw got away with Ricky Fowler, like you said. I still like it. I said on the show, I didn't want to go this crazy with him. I went to like 12% because I couldn't get to the number of overweight, but I really didn't like Grillo, and I like the other guys down below. And what I will say is he was clearly willing to take stands, but what's more obvious here than anything else to me, Luch, is look where he went. It's very stars and scrubs. Brooke Koepka, Dustin Johnson, Patrick Cantlay, Bryson DeChambeau, and $9,900 Casey, even throw in $8,800 Harmon. It just was willing to go with all the top names, being that it was kind of what we talked about last week. This field is stronger, but it's not that strong. Meaning, yes, all these names at the top look good. That makes the field seem exciting or a little bit more enticing. But at the same time, after that, the drop-off was huge. And that's where you'll see then, here's all his chances. Matt Jones, English, Mickelson, Guido, Higo, Todd, Wolf, no one wanted to go back to, Kazire, Poulter, all these guys that weren't getting any ownership, a little bit, and then underweight on the Schefflers, the Bradleys, all these other guys that had ownership. He was underweight because he was at or above on all the guys you had to take chances on, but were still decent names within the field. So I thought that was interesting as well. Any other thoughts on Hacksaw here before we move to the next one?
And I think that's a good point in terms of, theory and how much exposure you want of some of these guys. I kind of had the same thoughts as your closing thought right there. Is you look at Answer on Hacksaw's exposure. He was about 10% under Answer. He was about 12% under Paul Casey or something like that. All these guys that were chalky, that popular, he had shares of, but oftentimes, we talk about taking stands. So what are your thoughts on going, 10 to 12% underweight on some of the really popular plays? And just from what you're looking at, Tambo, you've done a ton more lineup HQ shows than I have, and you've probably analyzed more of this in terms of multi-entering builds. Is that effective going, 10, 12% underweight and all the chalky kind of, popular plays? Like, how did he make this work in your eyes here?
Yeah, it comes down to, like I said, a little bit of the strategy of it. It's what it is. I think it's a misconception on the market that too many times it's said, oh, you can't play you don't necessarily want to play everyone, because if you want to have the highest opportunity, you want to take some chances on some guys. Like if Ricky Fowler wins this week, he has an even better chance at winning this than likely where he ended up, because he had 32% Ricky. Or, Koepka goes on to win it, he's got even more lineups in the hunt. He's a better example, 45% over 8%. We know how important that is down the stretch. So there's that, but like he's just taking calculated risks. And someone says like, oh, you just got to fade all these chalk guys. He didn't fade them all. He just didn't get aggressive with very many of them, so that he still has outs if they get there. And you saw it. A 4% Garnett was the difference for him. He didn't need 40%. He didn't need 20% or 10% even. He had 4%. Yes, there's luck factors involved, but the rest of his pool added up quite nicely, because when we went back to this one, 99, 77, 76, 68, 80, 94, 71, 117, even Mickelson 64. It's not great. I'm just saying 105, 85. When your pool looks like this, and Ricky Failure, if you will, is the only one here that's bringing you down, that's going to be a problem if you don't have the rest of these guys around it. But when you've got your pool built in a sense like this, and then have enough of the other guys in, that's where the opportunity allows for you to have those guys to slide in there and get the right combination. It's not always going to work out. It's unfortunate how that goes at times, but you can look at it here. I'll go back to mine. I was sitting top 25 going into Sunday, and this is actually a 5 out of 6 ended up beating it, thanks to, again, Ricky Fowler there. But this was my lineup. If you go think back to Saturday night, this was sitting in 23rd place going into Sunday. Another sweat, I thought, here, maybe. Ian Poulter goes completely backwards. Jason Day does nothing. Scott shows up a little bit at 3 under, had an okay Sunday, but again, what he does, basically his top 35s now. Henley, backwards. Watson, implosion. Casey did not do anything until he had a crazy eagle streak stretch at the end, but just wasn't enough. So you see very mediocre across the board to round it out. But this had a chance there going in. And again, you look at the build, I maxed out, but 6, 5, 8, 8, Bubba 10, and then Casey at 28. Just one that fell into the mix there of guys that I like to play. But it just goes to show you can still mix it up and have guys that get you into the mix there. So anything else on this tournament before we move on to one of the other higher stakes ones?
No, let's get it.
All right, we'll round it out with this one this week. You mentioned it earlier. A lot of guys known across here. We've got JK, 123X, always dominating. Didi Pensack is a great player. Smell the Glove, McLovin, Brick is back in the mix. McLovin everywhere, littering the top 10. And then shout out to Shane's 13-13-9, 13139. Big win this week for them, 548.5. You mentioned earlier, single bullet. I don't know if they got in on a satellite or if they just said, forget it, I'm going to buy in. Actually, I do know, because he tweeted it out and said he plays this every week. I just remembered this and said, finally took it down. So I saw him shout out some guys. Good for him. Congrats to Shane. But Paul Casey and Answer, similar to the build we looked at earlier where Cal had it. He did have English. He also had Burns and Reeve. So this is almost the Cal lineup. He had Casey, Answer, Burns, and Reeve all the same, but then he had English and Leishman, the proper mix. The reason I really like this build, though, is the way it's set up, 9-9, 8-8, 7-7. Again, it's a 555 buy in for this one. For those of you that don't know, you can definitely satellite in for $9 or $11 or $18 certain weeks that you can find those satellites. Less than 1,000 people, 100,000 up top, and one bullet can get the job done, as Shane showed us. So we'll look at a couple others here, but what are your thoughts on this one? Very similar to Cal's lineup from earlier, but does make a lot of sense in my opinion. A couple of things stand out to me. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to get different in as many places when you're playing against 900 entries as opposed to 500,000. Right. So he had the 1% differentiator, and Leishman, Reeve was sub 10%. That helps too. But he played a lot of the quote unquote right plays, and most of them got it done this week. So that's totally fine. Again, contest selection. This would have won him a cool $1,000, I think, in 20th place in the bigger tournament, which is fine. But obviously you got to build differently here. And yeah, you do see 5 single bullets in the top 10 here in the 555. So that's cool. Kudos to the single bullet crew and among some of the household names in the industry here. So more of a balanced build here. Nobody over 10K. Went with Casey. That's fine. Again, this must have been a wild swing of emotions for Shane's, because we talked about the rocky beginning for Answer and the Casey bogey fest on the back. So this lineup was not up top for the whole tournament. That is for damn sure. So pretty cool to see it get done. And he won by 12.5 points. So good job, Shane. Good lineup.
Yeah, I love that too. Great call out there. As you imagine what his Thursday was like when these guys are just terrible, thinking that, oh man, this was the worst lineup of all time. And then on Sunday, even going into Sunday morning, like everyone had all but declared Bubba as getting his 4th Travelers Championship. And there was just no doubt he was going to go on to win this thing. And then to have him just completely implode and Harris English come from out of nowhere, that putt on 18 to even have a chance to be in the playoff at first was huge. The awkward show of emotion and celebration from Harris English, who doesn't show it too often, was obviously something to see as well. So I'm sure there was a wild swing of emotions there. Looking at a couple different builds here, some people, guys that we just know are crushers across the industry, JK being one of the best in the world with 13 entries here. So he didn't max it out, but still takes down a cool 50,000, had 536 with another Answer lineup, but I do like this one. It's the same type of build, 9-9, 8-8, 7-7. And what I like about it is, well, it uses Answer, and it has, again, you can go to maybe 100 to 110% in this when there's 1,000 people. We've talked about this in the past and, beat that one down probably, but to give you guys a heads up, that's why you see it. But the thing about it is I love the way they do it here, because the way he does it here, because Answer, well, he was going to be popular, as was guys like English and Harmon, were most people going to start their lineup extremely balanced with Answer and then also incorporate another 9K guy. So I really do like this build quite a bit. It was Answer, Neiman, Harmon, English, Day, and Wise. What are your thoughts on this one and just everything I just went through?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you more. More than usual, we're agreeing here. It's a good lineup. Aaron Wise garnering a decent amount of ownership. Good to see him, playing a little bit better golf than he was, getting back in the grind. So just a wonky week, man. Neiman wasn't really on my radar. Didn't score particularly well, but he was good enough, and sub 10%, got it done. The lineup fit 50K. And you see in these, we're going back up to the signature hole here. You don't have to be quite as unique to always take this thing down. Shane's used 50K, Jack's used 50K, Doll's Beep used 50K, your boy DD, 50K. So you don't need to always leave that 500 on the table if you're playing against less entries, but it's kind of either or. Either you're leaving some money on the table and you're playing popular guys, like you said, or you got to really keep an eye on that ownership when you use that 50K salary.
Yeah, and I do agree. And one thing I wanted to bring up too, because you mentioned Aaron Wise there, which I think is certainly something that's worth talking about real quick, and then we'll get out of here. I think we went through quite a bit here, but just trying to look it up on the side here to see. I believe Jason Day finished, gosh, I want to say T10. And you'll see here, he put up 82.5 DK points. T10 finish. Aaron Wise, T66, 71 DK points. So again, remember this when you're playing, especially in these sort of birdie fests, if you will, or tournaments where you're going to see somewhere from 15 under to 20 under get the job done. Remember, you're playing a game with points and a score. It's a salary-based game, but it's still whoever scores the most points. It's not always about positional points when it comes down to an event like this. And that's just a prime example. He's right on the tail of Jason Day, finishing 56 spots down the board, not even close to in contention, but it was 20 birdies over the week. And so again, birdie bogey doesn't hurt you as much in the scoring atmosphere, especially when you're putting together streaks and things like that will matter more. So I will keep an eye on that in these events going forward. Any final thoughts from you, Luch? If not, let the people know where they can find you, everything you got going on here at Rotogrinders this week, and then I'll take us home.
These were some great builds, and each of them were different in their own right based on contest selection. And I think they are all more than fine. I really like Hacksaw's build. He did it the right way. Got great leverage on one of the studs that everybody was afraid to play. That was like case in point DFS theory, taking a calculated risk, and sprinkled in a bunch of those punts. And Garrett ended up kind of being his guy. Great putting day. Mark Leishman did his thing. So that was probably my favorite. I'm taking nothing away from any of these, but of all the lineups we analyzed, I thought Hacksaw's was maybe the best constructed type of lineup in terms of leverage. So find me on Twitter at the J Carlucci. We do some NBA shows. I'll be talking some golf with you. I'm really excited for the Wednesday HQ show because, we talked briefly earlier this week, and there's not a lot of danger at the Rocket Mortgage. You got the Ricky Fowler narrative, who crushed me and many other people, including almost Hacksaw too. And, it's obviously going to be a big driver week, a big Bryson week, and everything like that. So going to see a lot of low scores, and you could get really, really creative and play some, I don't want to say puke stacks like Blender, but you can play some stuff that's hard to digest in the Rocket Mortgage show. It's going to be a fun Wednesday show, Tambo.
Yeah, I can't wait. Like you said, a couple things that stand out. One is we'll be able to bring across. I love when we have these wraparound shows where everything we just talked about today, the Hacksaw build, how can we integrate that or bring something like that across and think about it in that manner when we do the Wednesday show. It's definitely one you guys want to join us for, though, because this is going to be, I can tell you already, the Bryson week. Everyone knows there's not very much room for him to get in trouble. He dominated it last year, even with a few mistakes along the way, and still got the job done. 4 par 5s, very little room for error. It's very hard to imagine him not being in the mix. And, lock buttons will be in consideration on a guy like Bryson DeChambeau here this week. So one that you'll want to join us for here on Wednesday. I've, of course, got the Fantasy Golf Degenerates podcast with Kenny Kim. Some big news coming out on that show tonight. So you want to stay tuned for that. It's a free show. Be able to go and check it out. Tuesday night this week, I believe it's just myself and Noto, as Cards is going to be away on vacation. And then Wednesday, as mentioned, it'll be the show with myself and Luch. Excited about that. You guys know where to find me on Twitter at Totag and Tambo. Hit me up there if you guys have any questions or in the Rotogrinders Discord. Other than that, thank you and good luck.